Welcome, everybody. I see people joining in to the WebEx. I always say congrats to everyone for cracking into WebEx. For a lot of people, it might be one of your first WebEx virtual calls. This is definitely kind of classic for all of the panelists here who probably spend most of their days now on calls like this. But as hundreds of youth and participants from all over the world actually join, congrats on getting in there first. We're going to leave it for about another minute or so for people to trickle in and get started. So if you don't have a tea or coffee or drink, feel free to grab one quickly, and we will get started soon enough. So for those that are on, feel free to take a look at some of the hashtags. Feel free to follow any of our panelists on Twitter or LinkedIn. We're going to be looking out for some of those posts and resharing them after the event. So feel free to go onto LinkedIn or Twitter and use the hashtag RBC Future Launch for us to track along. Okay, well, let's get started. First off, welcome to everybody. We get to see where people are from that are joining us, and we have people from engineering to marketing, healthcare, all different industries, backgrounds, levels, countries even, and we're all here to be able to explore a really important topic in celebration of International Women's Day on challenging workplace norms for better roles and opportunities. I have the extreme privilege to get to work with a lot of our panelists in a variety of ways, and I couldn't be more excited to bring them all onto this 1 hour web conference for all of us to pick their brains, to learn about what they're up to. All of these people have built some of the most incredible talent programs to drive inclusion, to drive growth in all different industries, and they're here with us today for the next hour to learn. As a few housekeeping items, we will be recording this session, and we will make it available to everyone after the call. So we will hit record so that we can share it with all of you after. We will be opening it up to questions. And so if you do have questions, feel free to use the chat feature or the Q&A on the WebEx, and our team will be going through them and sharing them with us and our moderator, Wahab, to pick from them. So please do ask questions as you go. You'll also see the hashtag here, RBC Future Launch, and we'll be following along throughout the event and resharing. So as you hear some of those great quotes and sound bites, grab those, share them to inspire others who might not have been able to join this. Once the event is done, we will be asking everybody for feedback. So please do share some of the highlights and some of the feedback that you've had after the event. I'm going to introduce the panelists, but first, I'd like to just spend a minute to congratulate all of you for joining your RBC Future Launch Mentoring and Networking program. I know that networking and mentoring is such a critical part of career development and inclusion, and things like International Women's Day can really inspire everybody as allies and as women to find more time to have those career development conversations. We can all find more time to network, to build relationships, and to support one another. And I think in this very decentralized online world, we really want to bring those human connections back into all of our lives. And so I'm so glad you could join your different programs. And as you get matched to different people for those experiences, I think International Women's Day is just another reminder of how all of us can take time to build relationships and to have those career development experiences. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce our panelists in alphabetical order. First, we have Bridget from IBM, who leads talent acquisition across early career in North America. If there's anyone that's thinking about tech and helping people get into tech. Bridget is somebody that's really shaped some innovative programs on that front. We have Elaine from AIG. Elaine, previously COO of AIG Investments and now Chief of Staff to AIG President and Global Chief CEO. Elaine is based in New York City, has shaped mentoring programs, is an active advocate in all things inclusion. Really excited to have her join. We have Kelly from RBC, Senior Vice President of Talent Strategy and Solutions. Kelly's been leading the Center of Expertise across innovation and development of enterprise-wide talent programs. Kelly's been long at the helm creating inclusion and creating technology, innovation, and early career programs. Thanks to Kelly for joining us. We also have Vicky. Vicky joins us from Adidas and leads global future talent acquisition. She's been shaping strategy around all the different programs at Adidas and has been an active advocate in the inclusion space. And finally, without further ado, we have Wahab, who's our moderator. Wahab's an entrepreneur, a community builder. In his daytime role is a diversity business partner at Facebook. We've all them. And outside of Facebook is actually the founder of URX, which is one of the largest early career recruiting communities. So with that, I'll pass the virtual mic over to Wahab to take this away. Thanks again to our panelists for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Dave, for the introduction, and I'm really excited to be here. And I'm going to try my best to make sure that everybody caught that moment when you said that the chat works. We really want this to be a conversation. We want everyone to ask your questions. And so in that spirit, if I can have all the attendees in the chat right now, just go ahead and let us know where you're dialing in from across Canada and the US and maybe even globally. Just drop your city, represent your country, let us know, and then maybe we can shout out. Okay, I see Newfoundland. Let's keep it going. I'm pretty sure Newfoundland might. So now I might fail a geography test, but I might need some of my fellow Canadians to let me know where in the map that is. We've got Winnipeg, Germany. Okay, I love it. All right, so we're gonna have that keep. We can see where everybody's dialing in from, and then we can definitely get started. And so this is an important conversation today. As I said, International Women's Day is a global day celebrating the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. The day also marks a call to action for accelerating gender parity. We are all still living in a world where women are having to work harder, sacrifice more, and are only making 87 cents on every dollar in Canada and 81 cents on every dollar in the US. The numbers are even worse for women of color, Indigenous, and Black women. We also know that we're living in a time with the pandemic that has only served to exacerbate some of these challenges. Specifically thinking about entry-level jobs, there's far more gender parity than at the top. Studies show a pivotal moment when women's careers suffer is the first step into management, when 15% fewer women are promoted to managers than their male counterparts. It is said statistically that this missing first rung, if you will, of the corporate ladder is a point women do not catch up from. So how can we create awareness? And hashtag choose to challenge. What happens in the early career stages is what pushes women out of the workforce. How can we help and inspire young women, women of color? What is the role men can play here? As the only male on this panel, I feel an incredible sense of gratitude to be in a position to join this conversation. And I invite all of our panelists to challenge me during this conversation and challenge me to give my perspective on things that you would like to hear from a male perspective. The hundreds of audience members here today are eager to hear answers from experts like yourselves. Last thing, before we jump in, I want to encourage our attendees to ask some tough questions. Let's have this be a safe space for us to engage with each other and really try to chart a path forward for each other. All right. So I think when I last saw the chat, the Jennifer from Germany is probably taking the cake for who's dialing in from the furthest outside of North America. So we'll give her a nice little virtual round of applause. With that, I want to ask all of our panelists as a way of sort of getting us started. I want to ask about your experiences. And so the question I have to get us started is, what was each of your experiences like? What we read about in the stats and studies that I shared in the introduction, how does this resonate with you? Has being a woman impacted your career trajectory? And perhaps I can give this first question to Elaine.
Thanks, Wahab, and thanks to 10,000 Coffees for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here to celebrate International Women's Day and to discuss this very important topic. So when I was reading that introduction as prep, I found myself getting mad and then also, just saying, okay, I've read this before and I've heard it before. And I've experienced it myself, quite frankly. So, as far as the pay equity, I actually shared this story recently with one of my colleagues, and I think he was shocked. So just, I was getting promoted, and we like to talk about these dry promotions, right? So getting promoted to a job, which was several levels up from what I'd had in my, prior rung of my career. And I dared to ask if there was a compensation adjustment, and I'm saying that sarcastically. And you would have thought I was asking, for, I don't know, a private concert with Bruce Springsteen or something like that. But I said, hey, and I knew a colleague that had a similar role, right? So I'd done my homework, I benchmarked, and I said, is there a comp adjustment that comes with this new, bigger job? Again, the person I asked went to another white male individual who was the head of HR at the time, and then went to my former manager who was a white male at the time. And he said to me, don't be greedy, quote unquote. Basically, you should be happy for the opportunity. And I was stunned into silence because I knew it was a great opportunity. But it had a knock-on impact, right? Because I did not get that pay raise and I was sort of stunned into silence. When I got the next opportunity to work with a different leader, I thought to myself, well, I guess I have to prove myself before I get paid. And, fast forward in my most recent job as COO of investments, I was approving pay increases and hiring people all the time. And I'd never saw it since, where you certainly wouldn't hire a male colleague or promote a male colleague without giving them a pay increase. It just would never, I've just never seen it. And I've actually approved those. So it was shocking to me. And so when you see those statistics, you're not really surprised that women are lower on the ladder, because things like my example happen. You should just be grateful for the experience and then you'll get paid. Whereas I've seen it time and again where male colleagues will not even have the experience to do the job, demand the pay, get the pay, and then prove themselves. So has happened, to myself, and I've seen it happen. I've been around the block a few times, starting out as a private lawyer and then going to corporate America. So I've seen these things consistently, unfortunately.
Yeah, Elaine, thanks for sharing your experience. And it's sort of, I have to say that while it's sort of, I'm sad that you've had that, unfortunately, I'm not shocked. So when I hear that, it doesn't shock me. I wonder if there are any of our other panelists who have other experiences or perspectives that they'd like to lend to that question.
Hi, it's Kelly. I'm from RBC. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I empathize with that story, Elaine, and it's interesting because I'm not sure that it has necessarily affected my career. Like if I look back over my career, not that I've had some perfect trajectory, I definitely have not, but I've been fortunate. I've had good opportunities. I've had great sponsors and mentors, and I don't feel like my career has been impacted in a negative way, compensation or trajectory as a woman. But I have definitely been treated differently in circumstances because I was a woman. I remember when I first got sort of a bigger job, I think I was about I was about 25 or 26, like young, a long time ago. I'm a lot older than that now. So this was like 20 years ago. And I was going to be a branch manager, which at that time at RBC, you really had to work your way through those kinds of roles to come into head office jobs. And so that was the path I was on. And I had clients in the branch that wouldn't work with me, that said they wanted to talk to a man. And it seems crazy now to think about it, but I didn't know how to, I didn't know how to manage that at the time. I was like, oh, okay, let me get you. Totally, I understand. Let me go get you. Now I'd be all indignant about it, but my 25-year-old self at that time in our history was like, oh, that's totally reasonable. So we have come a long way, I think, from there. Yeah. But I definitely did have some of that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's a great way to ground us in some of this conversation. We have Vicky and Bridget with us, and I'm gonna go to Vicky first. Ideally, we would have more success across the career spectrum. We are having some success at the entry level. Vicky, can you talk to us a little bit about how your team breaks down barriers when recruiting for students and future talent, and how you look to hire more inclusively? And then I'd love to get Bridget's take on this question as well.
You all able to hear me okay? Okay, great. Sounds good. Great to be here. Thank you, 10,000 Coffees, for having me. I work at Adidas, and I lead the future talent acquisition strategy. So that really looks at our students and our internship population. And when we look at, we're really passionate about breaking down barriers into our programs and hiring more inclusively. So, the first step really that we've done as a team is take a hard look at ourselves. Do we represent the talent population that we want to recruit for? And that's a no, so we need to change that and ensure that our team also is representative of who we want to go after. Then we started looking at what are the areas in the recruiting process that can hold some bias and be exclusive to students. And so, and might not necessarily be an indicator of success in our company. And one of those items were looking at GPA. When we look at GPA, it's something called distance traveled, where we look at, you might have to have 2 jobs and be working kind of on the side in addition to your studies. Your GPA may not be as high as someone who has their school paid for and is able to focus on their studies. And so, having a high GPA may come with certain privileges that some other people might not have. And so that's something we decided to remove from our application process, and just understanding, the broader breadth of who someone is. We also decided to kind of take out the cover letter and introduce a creator one-pager and asking students, what makes you a creator? Tell us more about yourself beyond your CV, so that we can look beyond even which school you went to and more at kind of who you are as a person outside of kind of the professional sphere. So we're really trying to look for who is a culture add to the company versus a culture fit, so that can really diversify our workforce and focus on that potential of someone versus the experiences that they bring, because we know that can come with certain access or privileges.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there, Rob. Similar to Vicky, I think, what we found at IBM is the pandemic has actually allowed for more opportunity for more students. So traditionally, a lot of recruiting was done, the Ivy League schools, that's where the opportunity may be, but really with companies moving to this virtual environment, it's really opening things up and providing more access and opportunity to students, and especially women, because a lot of the conversations may take place, drinks after work or after school, and, women with families can't necessarily compete or attend those types of events. So one of the, I would say, more positive things coming out of the pandemic is really democratizing this access and opportunity for, not only women, but people of color, and breaking down those barriers.
Yeah, maybe if I can just jump in, I totally agree with that, by the way, that equalization that's happening. And, I think there's also a bit of a shift happening around transferable skills and letting go of some of the traditional notions that we've had around what is an exact, perfect set of credentials look like for X job. When I think about my own career, I used to always worry when I was in my 20s, I didn't go to an Ivy League school, I didn't do the right things. I wasn't the president of anything, and I'm not going to be viewed as favorably as other people. And it's possible that was true at that time, 25 years ago, but I actually don't find that to be the case right now. I think that organizations are really looking for fit for purpose. They want to know that the people that they're hiring understand the vision of the organization. And I think we're seeing a breakdown of some of these traditional barriers around education, even at RBC, which, I think some might see RBC as a really conservative company in some circles. I say this with, all the love of the company, but I do think that there are some people that would say banks are conservative and RBC, being the largest company in Canada, might be. But I even find for us, I'm seeing much more openness to, even if you don't have a university degree, even if you had some different, less traditional path, we're willing to talk to people that are excited and interested about working in banking. And I just think that's such a huge step forward, because to the point about privilege, I feel like otherwise we cut off this whole pool of people that would otherwise be exceptional hires. So I think that's a great trend in the marketplace over the last probably 5 years.
Yeah, and I think all of those points are amazing, and we want to see those trends continue. Another thing I notice about Elaine is you have a background in law, law.
Yes.
I think it's fair to say is a traditionally male-centric industry. So I wanted to ask, how did you choose to challenge workplace norms earlier in your career, as most of the folks in our audience are? Is there a particular incident that stands out in your mind? Maybe there's a moment where you felt like you made a breakthrough.
Yeah, great question, and I actually loved I loved that question because I was a private practice attorney for about 12 years before I went in-house corporate America, trying cases as a litigator, and I started out in the traditional area of law, but also add the other layer of pretty traditional field of insurance. I was an insurance coverage lawyer, so, and again, I work for an insurance company now, but it was pretty conservative, and I came out of law school in the late 90s. So to frame it for you, there weren't a lot of female partners. There weren't a lot of senior female women, quite frankly, at the top rungs of law firms. And I remember, a few lessons from that experience early on. I realized, unfortunately, some of the senior women that had gone through the ranks, and the very few that were at the top, felt that there wasn't this sense of mentorship or paying it forward. It was sort of like, I went through it, so you have to go through it. Like, that's how I experienced it. And a lot of my colleagues at the time. So that definitely shaped how I pay it forward now. Folks that know me well, Dave knows me very well about how I advocate for women, diverse colleagues, and really championing others. It's been sort of, I was like, okay, I don't want to be like that person. So that was one moment where it shaped me as a future leader to say, hey, it's incumbent upon me to pay it forward. But another moment where I really realized, shaped how I sort of brought myself to work and sort of thought about preparation as the great equalizer, if you will. I had to go to court for the first time. I was maybe 25, 26, which is, you graduate law school at the age of 25 if you go straight through. And I remember I was in court first time before a judge, and on the other table, my adversaries were 3 middle-aged white guys, literally. Like, I'm just painting the picture. One guy had a whole swath of gray hair, and I was 25, 26, which was a long time ago. And I had prepared so much. It was my first, I knew every case back to forward. I could cite the facts. I knew the footnotes and the facts of the footnotes of the cases. And I could tell my colleagues were not as prepared, because they were like, we're just going to pound the table and show that we're authoritative, and she's too young to know what she's talking about. Needless to say, I won the case, and that taught me very quickly that when you bring your excellence and your preparation, like, you can really achieve anything. And that's sort of been a benchmark for my entire career. Anybody that's worked with me or knows me, that my mantra is, there's no such thing as perfection, there's excellence. And that sets you up for your track record. And then it set, the path I had in law and other opportunities that kept being presented to me because I worked really hard. So that moment really showed me, Wahab, that, like, if you show up and you bring your best to the table, like, that's a great equalizer. And it really strengthened me, like that moment, and also the moment where I really seek to pay forward my experiences and my knowledge to, again, women in law, women in business, people of color in law, business, so it's incumbent as a leader.
Thanks so much for that anecdote, Elaine. And I'm actually, when we think about sort of, that entry level, that moment when you're just graduating law school and then you're crushing this first session, more power to you. And I
Thank
love
you.
that memory. It's interesting because while I don't think it was such a long time ago for you, the current time we're living in now obviously is virtual. So I'm actually going to go to Bridget here with this next question around, this whole virtual networking and mentoring programs for thousands of interns joining your company and just companies in general. I mean, what you're seeing. What are some best practices that you have for the youth and young women on the call?
Yeah, for sure. I would say take advantage of any opportunity that comes your way. So I think the 10,000 Coffees platform that you all have access to at your schools, that has been amazing. I mean, I wish I had that when I was in school. I went to the University of Waterloo, and I know there's a bunch of you on from there today. So I'm actively on the platform as an alumni, and I spend probably one Friday a month actually just doing coffee chats with students and just answering any questions, and I'm happy to do that. And I think a lot of people are open to it. I think the first step is just asking and being the one to put yourself out there and be like, hey, do you mind if we have a chat? I'd love to hear more about your experience. And I think that can be intimidating, especially for women. I think networking is tough. It's not everyone is an extrovert and not everyone is comfortable putting themselves out there. But it's just that first step in asking someone. And I always say the worst they can say is, I'm too busy, or no, which really doesn't happen too often, or they might not reply. And, that's unfortunately life, but there's probably 5 other people out there that will take the time for you, and you just have to find those people that will advocate for you. So I think, I touched on this earlier, but really with the pandemic and kind of the virtual world we're in, use it to your advantage. Really get out there, use LinkedIn, find the people that you admire, that careers you might want to follow, and reach out to them, and I'm sure they'll be happy to speak with you.
Thanks, Bridget. And Vicky, I'd love to kind of get your take on this as well, and then I'm going to come to Kelly after that. But Vicky, obviously you've got this role at Adidas, and I'm sure you've probably gone through this sort of virtual experience as well, and then maybe even in your own sort of like just professional life as perhaps a mentor or a mentee. Do you have any insights?
Question in terms of.
So I think what I'm thinking about is this like sort of virtual world, virtual networking, and how young women can take it, like sort of leverage it to their advantage to develop themselves or to get opportunities or to connect with opportunities.
Yeah, I think over the past 12 months now, being in a virtual environment has really broken down barriers. Before you would maybe meet up in person or have the location be a restriction or kind of access to a location. And now that's gone. And so with LinkedIn, with the ability to kind of just Google search someone and someone that you're passionate about, maybe it's on Instagram, you see an influencer that, is doing some really great things, or an educator on social media. You can reach out to them now, and you can have a conversation with them, also with Clubhouse, So I think the barriers are broken now because we are in a digital environment, and this generation is taking advantage of that. And I think you'll see more networking informally happening across these networks, and not your traditional style of networking that might be kind of awkward, standing around in kind of an event and getting some appetizers. You'll see more authentic, real conversations happening digitally.
So Vicky, are you on Clubhouse and you don't follow me? Is that what I've just learned?
I'm not that. Yes, I'm not there yet.
All right. Well, one, if you're on there, you gotta follow. We gotta follow each other. 2, if you're not, I got an invite for you. So we'll connect about that. Kelly, there's like, I guess maybe two sides to this, right? So virtual is great and it's breaking down barriers. Um, what I almost want to get your take on is the fact that, look, there's always been a fight for women to be seen and heard and sort of in the physical workplace, right? And have a seat at the table. What do you feel like career development looks like for young women when they aren't being physically like seen in a virtual environment right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question it's trickier right now. I think, I see this even across our organization, and I'm hearing it actually not just from women, from men and women that are feeling less visible because you don't have some of the even if you're working full time, you don't have that organizational kind of energy that you have when you're in the office. You don't bang into people on the way down to get a coffee. You don't have any of those kind of impromptu moments. For what it's worth, I'm a senior vice president at RBC, and even I have a moment of like, I haven't like talked to anyone, that I need to connect with unless they're in my immediate circle. So I think we're all having a bit of this challenge. But a couple of things I would offer is, first is just recognize the difference you can make at the tables you sit at today. Where you do have visibility, lean into your voice, be confident about sharing your point of view and perspective. And then second, it's, I do think there's this, at least for me, I can't speak for everyone, and I find the next generation is actually way braver than I was. So you all might be braver than me, but I used to really hold back a lot more. I would sit in a room and kind of think in my head about what I was going to say or whether or not it was my place to contribute to something. I did way more of that. And at some point, if you work long enough, and I think as you get older, you realize you have to really push yourself. And when you do it, people actually respond quite favorably and you sort of make a very different future for yourself. So if there's one lesson I have for women that are looking for those opportunities, is just every window that you have, take advantage of it and share your point of view. Don't second guess yourself and be like me where you like leave and think about all the things you could have said. Just say it, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not exactly right, even if you think they're going to think that you don't make any sense. I promise you'll make sense, it will be right, and you'll be glad you said something. So that'd be my thoughts about how we can look at that issue in a virtual world.
Thanks, Kelly. Elaine, I feel like I'm constantly putting you on the spot, but you've sort of achieved so much in your career to date, and I know that a lot of the folks on the call might aspire to those same levels of success. I'm curious if there are any insights you can share with us around, how you've broken through the glass ceiling, because let's face it, and I think we should acknowledge the fact that there is a glass ceiling that we're working to dismantle, but that work is still ongoing. So in your experience, what have you been able to, I guess, maybe some lessons learned around your progress sort of breaking through that?
Absolutely. Great question. I saw that and I was like, oof. Some of them I've busted through, others I'm still chipping away at. Every different career move I've had, it's been a different experience. But I have to say, it goes back to, there's a few different things. I talk about excellence a lot. I've done various panels and podcasts. And again, I find women especially, again, get mired in this, I must be perfect before I go for the job thing. Like I've seen it. I have 9 criteria, but I don't have all 10 on a job description. Like I'm that kind of person, and again, this comes with experience. Like, I just raise my hand. I'm like, I'll do the job. I might not even know the subject matter, but I'll take a chance at it. Because if you cultivate that excellence from the early on in your career, right? When I just told the story about being a young lawyer, I was so prepared, right? And I brought the best I could possibly be. So when you bring the best you can possibly do, there's no regrets. It's like sort of what Kelly was saying, like you'll speak up because you've prepared. It might not be completely on point, or you might be nervous to like raise your hand at that boardroom table for the first time. But once you do that, it helps you chip away at that glass ceiling, because then other people start noticing, right? Like it's, you take all this great internal stuff that you've built up, and when you start sharing it outwards, people notice. I mean, so that's the first thing. Bring your excellence. That helps you chip away at that glass ceiling. Then listen to your mentors and your sponsors and your allies who tell you to go for roles that you may never have thought of. I had one amazing mentor who said, you're working closely with that senior person. Ask him for what you want your next job to be. And I had that moment where I said, well, I just started working with him. He doesn't know how smart I am yet. And he's like, I don't care. And he literally would call me every single day on my commute home. And he's like, did you talk to him? Did you talk to him? Did you talk to him? So finally I set up some time and I said, okay, I talked with him. Right. So listen to those folks. There will be people. I mentor and sponsor tons of people, and I give career advice all the time. And they're like, so many times they're like, I never thought about that. I never thought about it that way. So if people are telling you stuff, they see something in you. So listen, especially the folks and colleagues on this call. Like if people are coaching you a certain way, they see something special in you. So listen to that, and that will help you again break through that glass ceiling. So it's all of these components: your mentors, your allies, your excellence, and then having that confidence in yourself. That gives you the tools and the tool belt to chip away at the ceiling, right? So that's how it's helped me with my career. And you could ask anybody that's ever worked with me. I strive for excellence in myself and for the colleagues that work for me. But I'm super fair as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Elaine. And one of the things that you said just now that sort of stuck with me was this idea of, you had sort of like a mentor who said, hey, here's something that you should do, here's a conversation that you should have. And so with that, I want to almost shift our conversation towards allyship. So we know that there's like sort of these institutions that we want to evolve, but we also can support each other. I'm going to put myself on the spot here. So I'd love to talk about male allyship as well. And I'd welcome the panelists to put me on the spot in terms of some of these questions and some of these conversations. But I kind of want to ask Bridget, what ways or have you seen men effectively support women in the workplace? And as a heads up to our panelists, I'd also like to talk about women supporting women as well as allies. So Bridget?
Yeah, no, I'm so happy you brought this up, Ahab, because I think it's such a important topic. And I think a lot of the times when we talk about International Women's Month and IWD, it's like, this is what you as women must do. You must do this and that and network, and a lot of the focus is on that. And it's like male allies are so important in this journey, and nothing is going to happen until we have their buy-in and support as sponsors. And it's so important to kind of include men in these conversations and have supportive allies. So I think it can be anything as around. And most of you are students on this call. If you're in a group project in school, it might be at the boardroom or at that level, but pass the mic, so to speak. Encourage your female colleagues in group work and meetings to speak up. Leave space for them, give them that opportunity. I think that just a little gesture, it may seem little, but it could open up that opportunity and leave space for someone else.
Thanks, Bridget. Hey, Vicky. So first thing is I'm a little bit of like a sports person. So in some ways, I'm really interested in your take on this, both from just your own experiences, but also the brand and the industry that you're in. I think we've seen a lot of great allyship amongst sports people, and so I'd love to just kind of hear if there's any insights that you want to share around it.
To kind of piggyback on Bridget's point too, and challenge that a little bit around kind of the role that men can play in terms of allyship. I think oftentimes when we're having conversations around women in the workplace, this panel is all women, and the onus cannot be on women to drive this conversation. It actually should be driven by men, and that we are supporting as women that conversation. And so oftentimes I think we look to men to support us or to sponsor us in these initiatives when in fact they are the ones in positions of power that can be driving the agenda much more powerfully and more effectively. So, I'll leave that there. In terms of kind of working at Adidas and in the corporate space, I think it's been really inspiring to see in kind of the sports industry, to see kind of athletes take a stand and for what they believe in. I think, when I see what happens with the NBA, and going on strike and kind of taking a stance for kind of their values outside of being an athlete, just as a person of color. That's really inspiring. I think what was disappointing to me was the lack of athletes speaking up that were not people of color or from the Black community. And, you know, I see this theme reoccurring in any space where, you know, when we talk about allyship, my colleague from Reebok, Aaron Tour, he's so great. And he told the story around turtles, you know, like, you know, some of us are born with a shell, you know, like born with white skin. And that gives you kind of more protection in certain environments to speak up for those who might not be born with that shell or with those privileges. And so the you speaking up can kind of would be less, potentially have less of an impact as someone who doesn't have that protection or privilege that they weren't born with. And so I think across kind of industries, when you look at the ladders, you know, looking at, there's a lot of representation at the bottom levels. You know, in any company, if you look at their frontline workers, restaurant workers, tellers, customer service reps, sales associates, it's super diverse there. And as you move up into your very first point, we'll have like, you know, you start to see less and less and less diversity. And I think, you know, we need to be asking really critical questions in any environment that we're in. Do you see people in leadership positions that look like you know, that represent you? And not only that, and if you do, that doesn't mean we've achieved gender or diversity parity. We need to kind of look at the whole ecosystem and structural, systemic as well. Is the board of directors, you know, does that have representation? Are the investors that are kind of making the calls on the company and what direction they're going, is that a diverse group of people? You know, who are we making business with, our vendors, our clients? You know, the entire ecosystem is all connected. And I think asking those critical questions in any position that you're in, you know, in academia, do your professors look like you? You know, what about the dean's office? What about the people who are donating to the universities and making those decisions? There's a lot of critical questions that can be asked to kind of move this conversation forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, we just dropped the mic, right? So thanks, Vicky, for that. And you know, the thing from, you know, from my perspective, if you allow me to share from a male's perspective, that I've learned is that you have to engage in the conversation. So, you know, I was at a company that had just started a women's ERG, and I was invited to join. And that was a aha moment for me, because it wasn't as if I knew that, like, oh, like this is something that I could do, right? But that invitation led to me really learning a lot more about what the women's experience in the workplace is, and how, you know, I might be able to engage and support whatever initiatives might come out of that. So a lot of the things that I've learned has been from that experience. But then the other thing I would share that I think you mentioned a little bit of, Vicky, as well, is it's a constant learning. So you mentioned sort of like the NBA and their work. You know, one thing that I noticed was the WNBA did like so much more over the course of that movement, but got minuscule amount of media coverage. And those are the type of things that I know we'd all love to see change. And then as the last question, and I'm just going to open this up to anyone who would like to take it before we'll go to the audience with some questions. I do want to touch on allyship amongst women and women supporting each other. And I know that can take a lot of different shapes and forms. So I'll open it up and see if there are any panelists who want to share anything around that topic.
Maybe one thing I'd offer there is, you know, I think that in any industry as women, you get windows of opportunity to amplify other women's voices. And it is incumbent on, and I think it's incumbent on all women that have reached a certain level where they have almost, equivalent influence or power, if you will, to men in the organization. They can have just as powerful a voice for the women of the organization. And so I think sometimes this conversation becomes about men and women. It becomes about, well, men are in these senior jobs, so men have to be able to help advance women. Of course, I agree with that. But I also think women have to advance women. And I think part of the way that we can do that is for women to do things very basic, like you talked about. I think it was Vicky or Bridget, you're in a conversation and a woman makes a point, and somebody else around the table kind of makes the point more eloquently maybe than they did, or more emphatically is usually the case. And people say, wow, that's a great point. As a woman, you can say, oh, actually, that was Bridget's point. Great that you brought that up, right? And it just normalizes the conversation a little bit, and it uses your voice to amplify someone else's. I find, for me, I catch myself sometimes realizing that the women around the table are willing to put ideas out there and not take credit for them. They just go, oh, that's fine as long as it's moving the group forward. But it really gets under my skin. So then I feel compelled to be like, oh, actually, wait, before we attribute this to John over there, this was actually Sally's point, And so I think the more of that kind of thing that women can do for each other, the more it creates a sense that we're all here trying to move the same types of things forward together, and that it's not a male problem or a woman problem. It's really a senior executive problem that anyone that is in a position of influence needs to use their voice to make sure others get the same opportunities.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback on that, that's a great point, Kelly, because again, I've said it before, where it's as long as I have any sort of power, if I'm not using that power to help others, then it should be taken away from me. I've said it countless times, like I don't deserve the position I have. You're not a manager of people, a leader of people, just for the title or your name in lights. It's, when you are managing or leading people, like I've always felt this way, no matter when I started as a manager to whichever position I held was, you're like, those folks' careers are in your hands, literally. Like when I would have dialogues with my direct reports, I'd say, okay, this is how you did this year. This is my feedback. You can grow here. We can tweak this. And then I'd say, okay, how did I do? Like, did I help you? Did I help advance your career? What do you want to do for your next career move? So you're 100% right. Like when you are in any position of any authority and you have an opportunity to champion men and women, people, men and women of, women, men, people of color, it's your obligation, right? And again, allyship, I am a strong advocate and ally and supporter of women, people of color, LGBTQ community. And it's, I use my voice every single day. And I have folks, who reach out to me several times a week. I get emails from all over the organization because they know I'm someone that they can trust and come to, just for advice or guidance. So I think it was Bridget who said, like, reach out to people on LinkedIn. Like, I love that, that idea. Like if one of the panelists here resonates with you, reach out to them and look to them for guidance and advice. And again, it's incumbent upon us to push people forward. But back to Vicky's point, you do need the men at the table. And I've championed and pushed on the senior male executives at my company to say, to bring them along. And Dave knows some of the folks I'm talking about, but just to say, hey, you have to support this platform, or you have to support this. And they've been terrific and wonderful and lend that also that other prong that's so critical to this conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Elaine. And maybe, Dave, maybe that's another conversation that we need to have is bringing more male allies to the table and making sure that, we're being held accountable to being part of this, and not necessarily, I think, Elaine, what I'm trying to get at is, Elaine, you have to go and, you have to go as a woman and go and pull your male leaders to the table. And I would love to see a time where folks are coming to the table willingly and with an open mind, open heart to engage in these discussions.
Yes.
Okay, so we have our first question from the audience, and if we can have, I believe it's Isha Talwar, and I apologize if I'm not saying your name correctly, come in and ask her question. So I think I see Isha there, but you're on mute currently.
Yes.
There you
Hi,
go.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone, actually, for hosting this wonderful session. I'll make my question pretty short. The only thing I was actually trying to ask was, I'm actually a new immigrant who's moved into Toronto from Dubai, and of course, I've often been sort of told about the importance of networking, which I'm actively doing, reaching out to industry experts. In my case, that's marketing and brand management. But more than often, I've actually noticed that, when I reach out to women, they actually come back to me and take out time to sort of advise me and share insights, industry insights. However, I feel a lot of times the men don't respond or don't really want to offer any sort of help or advice. So I was just wondering if there's anything that you all could sort of help me with. How do I break the cycle?
And Isha, maybe you can direct the question to one of our panelists.
I was hoping anybody who would actually feel comfortable, because I know it's a bit of a generic question, but if anybody has any insights on that, that would be very helpful. I'm open to that.
Yeah, I would just say if you're making connections, Isha, and it's nice to meet you. Thank you for the question. With women through LinkedIn or your network, and you're learning from them, that's awesome. But say, hey, listen, maybe if you've reached out to a male colleague in their organization and they haven't responded, say, hey, Dave, by chance, do you know Joe Smith? Can you introduce me to that person? Like leverage the people that you are connecting with and say, hey, I see so and so does this. Like, make them work for you. If I'm responding to you on LinkedIn and you see someone at AIG that really appeals to you, or from a learning perspective, say, hey, Lane, do you know like Joe Smith? Can you set that up? And I'll say, you know what? Let me reach out and see what I could do. So just you have to be creative sometimes, and then also maybe ping them a second time, and if they don't respond, move on to the next person. You'll get someone to respond to you.
Yeah, I completely agree with that advice. And the only other thing I'd offer is that, I think where Elaine was going there is something that we don't talk enough about, which is the connections of your connections, right? It's a lot. I mean, I know every senior person has this problem, just to tell it from the flip side, which is that I probably get hundreds and hundreds of these notes on LinkedIn, and you want to answer everybody and you just literally run out of time, right? So sometimes what helps me is somebody knows someone I know and they say, hey, Kelly, here's whoever Isha's story, and she's really looking for XYZ. It's just easier for me to prioritize that on my list. So if you do happen to know someone that knows someone that you don't know, using that connection and that mutual acquaintance, it sometimes gets you a little higher on the list, has been my experience, like practically speaking.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful, Elaine and Kelly. Thank you.
Thanks, Isha.
Thank you. So our next question is from Kizan Asami, and I think we have Kizan up. Hi, Kizan, can you hear us? So while we try to sort out the audio for Kizan, I actually have her question. Oh, I think we went back.
To hear. Right.
Kizan, if you can hear me, are you able to hear us? And let's see if we can hear your audio.
I can hear you, but I don't think you're able to hear me.
Yeah. Well, we can hear you. Awesome. We can hear you.
You can. Okay.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you. I apologize about that delay. I was wondering, as a woman leader, how have you been able to balance being an ally for women in the LGBTQ community, trans women, that type of thing? Because it's something I'm struggling with in terms of how do I, as a woman, become an ally for women who are trans or other people in the LGBTQ community? If you can give your own experience based on that.
So, Kizan, I'm not sure I understand the question completely.
So we were talking about allyship and having men be allies of women in the work environment. So I'm wondering, as a woman, how do we then become allies of trans women because that's something I'm struggling with. So Kelly, I don't know if you can maybe share that, since you are, in that type of the HR area, how do you go about bringing them into the conversation and not having any level of discrimination in terms of how you interact with trans women and people in the LGBTQ community? I don't know if that's clearer.
Yeah, for sure. I think I understand what your question is, Kazan, and it's true. It's tricky, right? Because I think some of the barriers that are facing maybe transgender women are different. They're similar in some ways to barriers faced by women and other, people of color and so forth, but they're different and they're nuanced. And so some of the ways in which we've stepped through this, we actually have a very senior executive at RBC who is a transgender woman. And we had to educate leaders a little bit on this topic, right? There wasn't, I don't think, enough understanding of some of the uniqueness of that circumstance. So we did a lot of training around that. We did a lot of conversations around that. And I would say that generally the way we've approached it is with the same kinds of techniques and tactics that we've used to engage with women, is opening up a dialogue, creating transparency about that, bringing people together, talking about their career paths, trying to remove barriers or perceived barriers in the organization and so forth. And so I'm not sure exactly what you're specifically struggling with, but I would say almost like challenge yourself to think about it the same as you would with anybody from a segment that you have a little bit less familiarity with, or if you are more familiar, just the kinds of things you might do to reach out to someone that you don't know as well. That's the way we've generally been approaching it at RBC. But it is a tricky segment in the sense that there isn't as many. So you end up with a very small population. So it's a little bit harder at a company like RBC to put together, like say an ERG or something, to bring people together because there's so few. So we've had to get a bit creative about it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kelly, because that's something that you don't want to have any kind of unconscious bias in your discussions. And so it's one of those things where you have to be mindful of saying she or her and, all those little things that make a difference in the conversation. So I appreciate your response.
Yeah, thanks, Kazan, for the question, Kelly, for that response. And, that's all the time we have for today. But I think that it's an amazing place to end in terms of this conversation, but understanding that, diversity, especially in terms of just even in supporting women, is intersectional. We did not talk a lot today about the experiences of women of color. We didn't have any women of color on the panel to represent that perspective, and we didn't have any trans women to represent that perspective. There's so much more that we can definitely have, and I think we can continue this conversation onward. So if you take anything away from today, it's what can you do to support each other, support others, to affect change. And with that, happy International Women's Day, everyone. I want to thank our panelists, and I will hand it back over to Dave.
Great, thanks. A virtual round of applause for our panelists. Thank you for sharing so much and your personal stories and experiences. I have a long list of notes, and we'll be sharing some of our highlighted quotes on social. As a next step,
hey Dave,
the conversation.
Hey Dave. Sorry,
keep the conversation going.
Dave, yeah. Dave, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I just realized I made a crucial error that I want to fix on the record. So I mentioned that we didn't have any women of color on the panel. We do have women of color on the panel. That's Vicky. I wanted to be explicit that we didn't have any Black women on the panel. So I think it's very important for me to correct that.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks again for our panelists and also for having some, these conversations are all about progress and about being comfortable to have a lot of these challenging conversations. And so in the next steps, continue challenging and learning and educating. And I know for me as a male ally, there's so much more that I can do to advance this important conversation. For everyone on the call, one of the easiest ways to get started is to encourage people to build relationships as allies, as women, and all of you are able to do that through the 10,000 Coffees programs that each of your schools offer in partnership with RBC Future Launch. So look out for the next coffee that we'll be hosting with some panelists April 7th. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you all on social from here.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.